Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC Rio, which goes down this weekend. And that's right, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. These Brazilian cards are always absolutely fire. They have been for all the years I've been watching the UFC. You know, I always love the Brazilian cards. High intensity, crazy atmosphere. The chants from the Brazilian crowd for the Brazilian fighters, it's just a nightmare place to be if you're an opponent of a Brazilian fighter. So, yeah, look, these cards are always absolutely fired. The card as well, looking at it from top to bottom, is absolutely stacked as well, with plenty of fun fights. And also from a matchmaking perspective, like, this fight card is really good from a matchmaking side. Like, there's a lot of these fights that I feel are super close fights, 50-50 fights. And yeah, there's some big favourites on this card. But even in those fights, I think that the lines are too wide. Like, some of the big favourites really shouldn't be big favourites in my opinion. So yeah, look, I think from top to bottom, looking at this card, there's a lot of 50-50 fights, which in my opinion, the matchmaking has been absolutely perfect, because this is exactly what you want at the highest level of the sport. You want these fights where you're going into the fights not really knowing who's going to win, knowing that there's paths to victory on both sides and who's going to be the better fighter on the night. So yeah, shout out to the matchmakers for the UFC here, because like I say, the matchmaking has been absolutely spot on here. Not only have they got the 50-50 fights, but they've also got some fire fights as well. But just before we get into these fights, as always, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. If you're playing the long-term game that like to make your own decision but like the written breakdown so you can see the justification of the certain fights that we're recommending from a betting perspective, then we've got that section for you. If you're a fun gambler, you like the long shot parlays, maybe you want to build your own parlays from a selection that we choose from in a create your own parlay type of section, or whether you're somebody that just doesn't want to do any work whatsoever and just wants pre-built parlays for you to quickly go onto your bookies app, drop the bets and place the bet, then we've got that section for you with the fun gamblers. And if you're somebody that doesn't want to do any work whatsoever and just wants to tail a professional handicapper, which is myself, then we've got an official bet section for you, which tells you exactly which fighters have got the money on them from my pocket. And then of course, every subscription, betting subscription at MMA Play 365 comes with Base AI, our UFC prediction software, which has been on absolute fire this year. And it's no surprise that the majority of the people that are subscribing to MMA Play every single week are actually subscribing for the AI predictions. It gives a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every UFC fight on every UFC event. But like I say, not only the accuracy, but the underdogs that it selects as well, I think is one of the biggest pros when it comes to Base AI, because some of the underdogs it throws up, even I'm looking at it thinking, yeah, I don't think that's going to come through. And then they actually come through, and some of them are quite decisive. And you think, well, when you take human analysis, eyes, a human brain, and bias out of an equation, it's really interesting to see what a data-driven algorithm can actually produce when it comes to mixed martial arts. But look, I'm digressing. But yeah, look, every single betting subscription with MMA Play 365 comes with Base AI as well. So you get both Base AI and the professional handicapper betting advice all in one place, all under one subscription. You just have to choose whether you want to purchase for just one event monthly or take advantage of our 12-month subscription package, which is just $99. It's also $10 a month or $5 for the single event. Everything's super affordable. Our ethos is we want you to make your money back as quickly as you possibly can that you spend with us, so you can start profiting on top of your bets. And by making the service affordable, that's how we achieve that. So again, if you're jumping into the action, which I'm sure you are if you're listening to this podcast, make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com. Now let's get down to breaking some fights down, and as always we start in the main event, and it's a real good main event. We've got Charles do Bronx Oliveira versus Mateusz Gamrot. Now this fight, for a start, obviously it's 5 rounds because it's a main event, and it's one of those fights where it's absolutely the type of fight that you want to be 5 rounds. Whether it makes it 5 rounds or not, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, if we get to a judge's scorecards, after the end of this fight for 25 minutes, you know this has been an absolutely crazy back and forth fight. So, look, Gamrot's actually taken this fight on short notice, which is the first thing that we've got to take into consideration. How short notice that is remains to be seen because, as I say all the time, when we see that a fighter has pulled out of a UFC fight or if there's a replacement fight straight away. So sometimes it'll be fighter A pulls out of this fight or it'll be fighter A pulls out of this fight but fighter B replaces them. Whatever we're seeing on social media in regards to, you know, the media companies dropping the breaking news that a fighter's out or that there's been a replacement, the UFC will have known about that for at least 2 weeks. So when people say, okay, well, he's taking this fight on 2 weeks' notice because it's 2 weeks before an event, well, no, that's not necessarily the case. The fighter that's been replaced, so the fighter that's stepping in on short notice, will have likely known about that for probably, again, I would say between 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the situation. So it's always a little bit longer than what some people are aware of. But it's still a short notice fight nonetheless. And for Charles Oliveira on the flip side, like, he is facing a different type of opponent. He was initially due to fight Rafael Fiziev, but now he's fighting Gamrot. Gamrot's more of a wrestler grappler. Fiziev's more of a striker. So it's a very different style of fighter that Oliveira's got here to what he was preparing for. However, the good news for Oliveira is he's probably got Gamrot's style preferred opposed to Fiziev's. Like, Fiziev is an elite level striker. Oliveira will have had difficulties from a striking perspective, whereas with Gamrot's posing a completely different problem. Gamrot's going to be shooting takedowns, probably at a high clip, trying to get the fight down to the mat, and that's where Oliveira is, you know, that's his world, down on the mat. He's probably the best submission artist that we've seen in the UFC ever. He's got the most submissions in the UFC, but I say probably because we've got the likes of, you know, your Damian Myers and your Jacare Souzas and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, I don't want to be disrespectful to those guys, but look, Oliveira is an absolute monster when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And this is where it gets interesting because does Gamrot actually shoot takedowns in this fight? Because where Gamrot is going to want to go, generally speaking with his style, is where Oliveira is going to thrive. And if Gamrot does take Oliveira down, which I think he will, if he shoots takedowns, I think he will get Oliveira down, it just gives Oliveira opportunities for submissions, for sweeps, and Gamrot's a little bit erratic on top, and I love Mateusz Gamrot. Like, I've bet on him so many times, I've cashed on him so many times, I love his style. But I do think that he's erratic on top. He's not one of these fighters that lay heavy chest to chest, secure a position. A bit like, you know, like an Islam Makhachev, for example. When Makhachev took Oliveira out there early, Makhachev settled first and then methodically planned his route to the finish. Whereas with Gamrot, once he's down, it's like he's a live wire. It's like, right, it's go time, 100 miles an hour. And what that's going to allow fighters or opponents opportunities for is the sweeps, the get-ups, potential submission opportunities as well. And the last person you want to give any opportunistic opportunities to on the mat is Charles Oliveira, because he will absolutely snatch them up and he'll see them coming from a mile off. So I actually think Gamrot taking Oliveira down is going to be relatively dangerous for Gamrot, because he's not that. If Gamrot was a little bit different, if he was chest to chest, laying heavy on top, control time, secure position, don't give his opponent any room to maneuver, no spaces to try and hit sweeps or reversals or stand back up or submissions, then I think it would be a different breakdown. But Gamrot's just not like that. Like, Gamrot, when he takes fighters down, for the most part, they can get back up to the feet. But these fighters aren't Charles Oliveira on the mat. Oliveira's at a different level. And then when you look at the striking, like, again, Gamrot's a live wire on the feet. Does he catch Oliveira with something wild, knock him out? That's definitely a possibility. I could see that happening. I think if Gamrot does win this fight, it wouldn't shock me if it was just a crazy exchange that Gamrot landed something on Oliveira. And then from Oliveira's perspective, like, yes, he's predominantly a grappler himself, but his striking has been developing for years and years. You don't get to become a UFC champion and defend your belt multiple times if you're not well-rounded everywhere. Like, you've got to be good everywhere. Look at Merab Dvalishvili from last weekend. Like, pressure wrestler, relentless wrestler, but he's had to improve his hands if he wants to keep that belt, to the point where he's dropping Corey Sandhagen. So, like I say, Oliveira's striking's good as well. If this is a technique versus technique 25-minute striking fight, I think Oliveira beats Gamrot. I think if this fight goes to the mat, I think Oliveira's got a good chance of beating Gamrot. The question is, does Gamrot go with his usual game plan of taking his opponents down? Well, I think it's just ingrained in his DNA at this point. I don't think Gamrot could have a fight where he stays on the feet and he's thinking, right, I can't take this guy down. I don't think, even if he had that thought, because he's going to come into this fight thinking, I'm going to dominate Oliveira where Oliveira's best. And he will have that ego about him to try and do that. I don't think he does. But even if he had that game plan of, right, okay, I'm not going to take him down, once a few exchanges have happened and the car crashes happen and he's in the pocket, I guarantee he shoots the takedown. So I think Oliveira is going to get the fight he wants here. And I'm very intrigued to what happens on the mat, because I know that Gamrot isn't this heavy pressure wrestler on top. I know that he's gonna be flying around different positions. Oliveira is also going to be very active off his back. He's not going to lay shoulder to shoulder on the mat. So I do think we're going to see a lot of live wire scrambles and action on the mat, and I just feel that that's where Oliveira is going to be able to capitalise here. With Gamrot coming in on short notice as well, like even if this is a bad opening first couple of rounds for Oliveira and Gamrot's, expending a lot of energy, which he does, he's a very live fighter, then does Gamrot tire down the stretch? I don't think Oliveira will. I think Oliveira will come stronger later, especially if Gamrot's having the good early moments, flying around at 100 miles an hour. So I do think that, although it's a close fight, and I'm absolutely not going to be shocked if Gamrot wins the fight, I just think situationally and stylistically and the short notice, I kind of feel it favours into Charles Oliveira here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Charles Oliveira to win this fight. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, this is super intriguing. We've got Deiveson Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson. Now, the first reason it's super intriguing is you look at the betting line. And this is one of those fights that I mentioned in the introduction that I think is much closer to 50-50, that the odds just don't reflect. You've got Montel Jackson out at like minus 300, which I was very, very surprised about. The return on Figueiredo, you're looking at anywhere between plus 200, plus 250, depending on what book you're looking at. But like I say, I just feel that the odds are massively wide here. You've got Figueiredo, and this is always the interesting aspect of any of these types of fights. You've got Figueiredo that is taking a massive step down in competition. He's a former champion. He's used to fighting the best of the best on planet Earth. And Montel Jackson, on the other hand, is on his way up. He hasn't never fought or beaten anybody like Figueiredo, and now he's got his step up in competition. Let's see where you're at. Can you beat somebody like Figueiredo in Figueiredo and himself? So this is super intriguing. Like, Figueiredo's coming off back-to-back losses, but those losses are Corey Sandhagen, who's just fought for a world title, and then Peter Yan, who is a former world champion and fought for the belt before as well, even when he'd lost it. So Figueiredo's coming off back-to-back losses against literally the best of the best, and prior to that he was beating the Cody Garbrandts, the Rob Fonts, the Marlon Veras, which I think are right now in and around where Montel Jackson is at. At least that's what we know of right now. We're going to find that it's one of these fights where, you're probably not going to want to hear this if you're listening to this podcast and you're wanting like a really solid lean on a fight, but it's one of these fights where you're just not going to know, and you're not going to know if Jackson is at that level of Figueiredo right now until after he's fought Figueiredo, because it's not as if Montel Jackson's also been fighting the Marlon Veras, the Cody Garbrandts, and the Rob Fonts. He's taking a massive leap up, he's leaping over those types of fighters. So he's almost leaping into a couple of levels higher, and he might be ready for that. He's a good fighter. He's got insane athleticism. He's got power. He's long. As the commentators, I'm sure, will say, his glove size is bigger than Francis Ngannou, which we've all heard a million times. He's got a wrestling game to go with his striking game as well. He's got decent grappling. He's got good cardio. Like, he is the full package. But like I say, there's always levels in MMA, and I think people miss that most of the time. They forget that there's levels. And Jackson, like I say, I think is leapfrogged a level above him, which is, like I say, your Rob Fonts, your Marlon Veras, your Cody Garbrandts, which is the fighters that Figueiredo is still beating, but then jump straight into Figueiredo, and we just don't know. Like, if Jackson had come into this fight after beating Marlon Vera and Rob Font, for example, and now he's fighting Deiveson Figueiredo, then I'm sat here thinking, right, okay, he's ready for that now. I can understand why he's a minus 300 favourite, but we haven't seen that. I mean, Montel Jackson's coming off wins against Daniel Marcos, Damon Blackshear, Rani Yahya. Now, I will give him Daniel Marcos, like, that's a good win. But again, like, even though I've hyped Daniel Marcos for quite a while, and again, I've loved betting on Daniel Marcos over the years, Daniel Marcos hasn't fought that upper level either. So it's not as if Marcos was beating the Rob Fonts and the Cody Garbrandts and the Marlon Veras, and then Montel Jackson comes in there and beats him. So this is what I mean, that there's a clear level difference of this jump up in competition, and I do think Montel Jackson's got all the tools to be able to win this fight. The fact he's going to be taller, longer, he's going to be younger, quicker, I do like those traits, and those traits are normally the traits of a fighter that's going to win the fight. So I am actually, going to pick Montel Jackson to win the fight. But like I say, from a betting perspective, I just don't think, unless you're just lobbing Jackson into a long shot parlay just to boost your parlay, which I always say, look, there's a difference between, betting long term and actually going for that value, which if you are doing that, I think the value is on the underdog side here. But if you're just looking at a parlay where, there's not much risk and you're playing little risk for big reward type of thing, then yeah, I get why you would put Montel Jackson in there. Like, there's two different types of bets there. Now, from a straight pick and prediction perspective, I will usually side with the underdog in these types of fights that I think are close, that the line's too wide. But like I say, when you're looking at youth, height, reach, speed, power, like, those are traits where that fighter wins more often than not. So from a straight pick and prediction perspective, I'm picking Montel Jackson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Vicente Luque versus Joel Alvarez. Now, I just can't make my mind up on the betting line here because, look, Alvarez is minus 600. There's not a lot you can do with him here, again, unless you're throwing him in a long shot parlay. But, like, at minus 600 with Luque at plus 400, your betting brain instantly turns to Vicente Luque as the value side, and oh my god, I'm getting Luque at plus 400. He's no longer fighting, the top sort of 3, 5, 10 in the world. Alvarez is dangerous, but he's not the type of fighter that Luque's been losing against. So it instantly makes that plus 400 an attractive number. But then in reality, is it going to be one of those bets where it looks really nice on the surface? Pre-fight, you absolutely love it. You're saying you're getting a ton of value in a fighter that is still got, very good capabilities at this level in the UFC. But I just think it's going to be one of those big, nice betting tickets that loses. Like, even if it's a close fight, which I think it's going to be closer than the betting lines suggest, I just don't think a Vicente Luque betting ticket is going to be a winning one here. Joel Alvarez, and again, by the way, a lot of people might automatically think, oh, Alvarez is this younger, fresher, hungrier fighter, and that's not the case either. He's 32, Vicente Luque's 33, and Alvarez is also massively experienced as well. It's the difference between the two is that Vicente Luque has been pretty much in war after war after war in his UFC career. There's a lot of miles on the clock there, whereas Alvarez, he has had a lot of fights in his career, but they've not been as intense and back and forth brawls as what Vicente Luque's been in. So Alvarez, although the age by number is not that different to Luque, he will look younger and fresher just because he's not been in those wars back to back. Like, and I think that's one of the things that's going to show in this fight. Alvarez will be fresher. He will look younger. He will fight like he's the younger fighter. He's explosive. He's powerful. He's got a crazy good grappling game as well. Now that grappling game seems to be off his back. So Vicente Luque, does he take Alvarez down, knowing how dangerous Alvarez is off his back? Does Luque trust himself enough to stay safe? And he could potentially stay safe, but the thing is, Alvarez is a live wire off his back, and even if it's not an armbar or a triangle that he locks up, it just wouldn't surprise me if he just hit a rubber guard and started smashing his opponents with elbows from bottom and just being a nightmare to deal with off his back. Like I say, he's one of these very tricky grapplers to deal with, but then on the feet, he's tall, he's long, he's big, he's powerful, cuts a lot of weight for the division as well. So, and he's also got cardio. And I know Alvarez, I'm saying he's cutting weight for the division. I know he's moved up in weight from lightweight is where he used to fight, but he's still absolutely massive for this division. He's filled out really, really well. So for me, I feel like Alvarez is going to hit Luque with some hard shots, which now is a question mark. 3-4 years ago, that's not a question mark. Luque eats those shots and walks through them. But right now, I don't think he eats the shots that he used to be able to. So I think Alvarez is going to land hard shots on him. I think Luque is going to struggle to where he's going to have his best chances of winning this fight, because I don't think they're going to be on the feet unless he starts chopping the leg down. If he can really hurt that calf of Joel Alvarez early in this fight, that'll give him a good chance. But again, how probable is that from a percentage perspective? You're looking at, it's probable, but maybe low percentage. And then does Luque try and take him down? Again, we've been through that. If Luque takes him down, Alvarez is going to have a good time off his back. Alvarez is probably one of maybe 5 fighters that I can think of off the top of my head in the UFC that might actually be able to win rounds off his back. So yeah, I think it's a tough fight for Luque. You've got Alvarez, who's going to be quick, he's going to be fast, he's going to be powerful, he could win on the mat, he could win standing up, he's going to be, in Luque's face. He's going to be providing overwhelming pressure, pushing Luque on the back foot. And I genuinely think Luque's best option here, outside of catching Alvarez with a big punch whilst Alvarez is moving forwards, is just trying to beat up that leg early. But I just think that's going to be a difficult job. Alvarez can switch stances as well. And again, if Luque is pressed back to the cage, Alvarez gets into a clinch position, I think he's going to be physically stronger as well. There's just a lot of upside here for Alvarez. And although that minus 600 line is not attractive at all, the attractive line is the plus 400 on Luque's side. I do think that Luque betting ticket is going to be a losing one here. I think Alvarez has got an opportunity to really look good here and propel himself to that next level in the UFC. Because if he comes in here and absolutely smokes Luque, then his name's well and truly on that map. I think this is a real opportunity for Alvarez, and I think he's going to take it. So I'm picking Joel Alvarez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we're in the heavyweight division, and this is a close fight. The lines are close as well. So this is one that I absolutely agree with from a betting perspective. You've got Jhonata Diniz versus Mario Pinto. Now, normally in these types of fights, I'm saying, look, it's a close fight, so whoever's the underdog is going to be the side to bet. But the reality is, it's a dead even pick'em at most places. At the time of recording this podcast, the betting line is very close, dead even pick'em, most bookies. There is a couple of slight leans onto Pinto being the very, very slightest of favourites, but for the most part, it's bang even between them, and it reflects the not only the style of fight, but where both fighters are at as well. Like, Diniz has come into the UFC and he's been hot and cold. He's had some good fights, he's had some bad fights, he's had fights where you think he's going to absolutely lose and then he shines, and then vice versa as well. But then the only real big loss he's got is the Marcin Tybura fight, which that's not a terrible loss. So you've got Diniz, who clearly has a hole in his game within the wrestling and grappling, and that's where fighters are going to get at him. But on the feet striking, he's got a striking background, a kickboxing background, so he's a very technical striker, picks his shots, good accuracy. You can see he's well put together from a striking perspective. But then you've got Mario Pinto, who on the other hand is also a striker as well. So both fighters are probably going to get what they want here, because I don't think Pinto wants to be against the Marcin Tyburas of the world, either getting taken down and laid on and pounded on and potentially submitted, all that good stuff that comes with the top game of the likes of a Marcin Tybura. Pinto's going to be wanting to be tall, wanting to be long, firing punches straight down the barrel from the outside. And this is where they're quite different. Diniz, although the height and reach does say it's quite close between the two, I've got a funny feeling when they step together, I think Diniz is going to be significantly shorter than Pinto. I've just got that feeling. Sometimes the numbers just don't make sense. Sometimes they do. But I just feel that Pinto is going to be a lot taller, a lot longer than Diniz. Maybe even in their stance. Diniz might be a little bit more slouched and lower in his stance, whereas Pinto's very upright, fights long, fights rangy. But Diniz, for me, I think is going to be the one that's going to work his way inside, hard low kicks, brute force to the body, be a little bit of a wrecking ball coming in. Whereas Pinto, I think Pinto's going to want to keep as much range as possible and fire from the outside because, like I say, I think he's going to be taller and longer here, significantly, especially with the leg reach as well. So Diniz is going to have to do a little bit more work closing the distance, but I do think he can close the distance. And it's just what happens. Is Pinto going to get the best work off in the fight from the outside, or is Diniz consistently going to get inside and land on Pinto? But then if you get too close to Pinto, he's got that long, sleek frame. He's going to have the points on his elbows. He's going to have hard knees. So I just feel that it's a very difficult fight to predict because if Diniz comes in here, walks Pinto down, lands something on him and knocks him out, shocked? No, absolutely not at all. But if Pinto prevents that, stays on the outside and just pieces up Diniz from the outside, wins comfortably, am I going to be shocked? No. And from that perspective, that gives you an oversight of how both fighters can be dominant. But if this fight's super close and back and forth, and Diniz is having moments coming inside, but then Pinto finds his range and starts piecing Diniz up at range, and then Diniz has had enough of getting pieced up at range, so finds his way back into boxing range again and starts landing hard shots on Pinto, and we've got a bit of a cat and mouse game going on, and it becomes super close and it's a split decision. Am I going to be shocked? No. It's just one of these fights that, yeah, I'm just really not that confident of either fighter winning. And even when it comes to does this fight actually finish or not, logically it tells you, well, yeah, it probably is going to end. Someone is going to find a knockout, but I could also see both of these fighters just trying to out-technique each other and it going to a decision as well. So unfortunately, it's one of these fights where, look, I'm not going to sit on the fence. I will give you the fighter that I'm picking to win, but it is very low confidence because I could see this fight playing out in so many different ways. They're both so close, at least pre-fight in quality, skill set, but they're also different in regards to where they're predominantly best as well. Predominantly best striking, but very different strikers is what I mean by that. So it's a real tough one to call, but I'm going to side with the tall, long, rangy fighter that wants to keep the fight at range, that can also do damage at super close range as well. So for that reason, I'm picking Mario Pinto to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ricardo Ramos versus Kaan Ofli. Now, Kaan Ofli, I really liked in the Ultimate Fighter. He came out the Ultimate Fighter and, I was talking quite highly of him, really liked what I saw there. And yeah, he's not kicked things off in the UFC very well. He's been a little bit underwhelming and not really, you just don't know. You don't know whether he's shone on the Ultimate Fighter, got onto the big stage under the bright lights and just not been that same fighter fighting up in competition. There's a difference between the Ultimate Fighter competition and like legitimately solidified UFC fighters on the UFC roster. There is a quality difference for the most part between those two types of fighters. And Ricardo Ramos, I think, is at a stage as well where, look, he had a lot of hype on him. I gave him a lot of hype as well. It's actually two fighters here that I both thought that was going to go on to do really good things. But Ricardo Ramos was more way back in the day. Like, he looked like a real prospect. And again, he's won some, he's lost some. The inconsistencies are there. Wins when you expect him to lose, loses when you expect him to win, that type of fighter. But it's the inconsistency and the fact that you can be winning a fight comfortably and then suddenly fall off a cliff and lose the fight in an instant that does make me very concerned. Not just from a betting perspective, but even picking him to win. Like, it's hard to have that much confidence in a fighter that can look great and then just lose at the drop of a hat. And on the flip side, Kaan Ofli, this is probably the best level opponent that he's had in the UFC in regards to being able to get a win, because even if he is going to struggle from a technique perspective and a skill set perspective, Ricardo Ramos, like I've just said, could absolutely be beating the brakes off Kaan Ofli and then suddenly lose in the moments, in a moment or in an instant. And yeah, I just think it's a super close fight. Ricardo Ramos being around minus 200. Like, on one side of the fence, I get it. But then on the other side of the fence, I'm like, does anybody really want to be laying minus 200 on Ricardo Ramos, knowing that, he's got those inconsistencies and unforced errors in his game? I just don't think that's the route to go. I think if you are betting this fight, I think you need to be looking at Ofli, because Ofli, again, I just don't think he's as good of a fighter and as skilled as Ramos. I think Ramos is the better technical striker. I think he's got the better grappling. But Kaan Ofli, where Kaan Ofli is probably better, is the wrestling. I think the wrestling could be the difference maker here. So even if Ramos is the better grappler, does he catch Kaan Ofli with something if Ofli's on top of him. Well, no, I think Ofli's good enough to be able to keep himself safe from submissions off his back. I don't think he's at that level where he's going to be getting caught from arm bars and triangles in guard. So yeah, look, this fight could go, like I've just said with Diniz and Pinto, the fight could go multiple different ways. I'm not going to be shocked if Ramos wins. I'm not going to be shocked if Ofli wins. I'm not going to be shocked if either fighter's dominant, and I'm not going to be shocked if it's a super close fight either. It's just the difference between this fight and the Diniz and Pinto fight that I've just been speaking about is we've not got a dead even pick, and where I just have to make a pick regardless of either side. We've got Ofli that's a solidified underdog, and that's the side that I'm going with in a fight that could play out in so many different ways. Both fighters have path to victory, so I'm picking Kaan Ofli to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Lucas Almeida versus Nicoll Aswell. Now, I was a little bit surprised seeing the betting line here with Lucas Almeida, sorry, nearly said Lucas Aswell, with Lucas Almeida being the underdog. And he's not a big underdog, but I did think that Almeida might be around maybe minus 140, minus 150. So to see him with actually a plus in front of his number on the betting line was a little bit surprising. Now, Nicoll Aswell, he does have the age on Almeida, so, you know, he's younger, he's going to be fresher. But Aswell is yet to be really tested in the UFC, and I don't think Almeida is like this high level UFC level athlete where, you know, he's going to be top 10, top 15 and he's going to put an absolute beating on Aswell. But the bottom line is Almeida's losses in the UFC, he only loses against legitimate fighters. And in the UFC, those fighters he's lost against, or under the UFC banner, shall I say, from the Contender Series, we've got Daniel Zellhuber, Pat Sabatini, Andre Fili, Danny Silva. Like, those are legit fighters. Those are, you know, I mean, it's never good to take a loss, obviously, or multiple losses, but those are really not that bad losses. And if all of those four fighters fought Nicoll Aswell, I think they'd all beat Nicoll Aswell as well. So this is what I mean. I think that the fight's much closer. Well, it's definitely closer than the betting line suggests, but I actually think that the underdog should be the favourite in this fight. Like, this is going to be in Brazil as well. Almeida's going to have the crowd. And the thing is with Aswell, like, what Aswell's got going for him in this fight is Almeida can get overwhelmed a little bit when he's fighting somebody that's super high volume. And Nicoll Aswell is exactly that. He's had 2 fights under the UFC banner, and they've both hit 100 plus significant strikes. His average striking per 15 strikes per minute per 15 minutes is around 9 strikes per 15 minutes, which is a very, very high average, although it's a very small sample size. But on the flip side to this, Aswell gets hit a lot as well. So for those 9 strikes that he's landing per minute on average, he's absorbing more than 7 strikes, and that's also a high average, also a low sample size. So what it's telling me initially from Aswell is he's a fighter that'll be in your face. He'll land 2 or 3 if it means eating 2 or 3 back. Like, he's going to get hit. For as good as he is, for high volume as he is, he's going to get hit in return. And the thing is with Lucas Almeida, where he shines is in these types of brawls with exchanges. He finds the home for one of his punches on the chin of his opponent, and he's got power. He is quite explosive. He's got elbows. He will throw knees as well. Where Almeida hates, or seems to hate his fights going, is where his opponent's got hands but then will level change into takedowns, and he kind of doesn't know when the takedowns are going to come, and then that makes him a little bit hesitant, and then he can get got at with the volume. But here I don't think Aswell is going to be as much of a threat from a takedown perspective. I think Aswell's going to throw hands in this fight, and if both fighters here are exchanging, I like Lucas Almeida to land something. And even if it doesn't knock Aswell out and he doesn't finish him, I think he can hurt him enough to make Aswell just start second guessing and questioning himself inside of these exchanges, which is where he generally thrives in his fights. So yeah, for me, I think, look, Almeida's losing against competition in the UFC that's a level above Nicoll Aswell. He tends to be beating the fighters in the UFC that are around Aswell's level, and Aswell, of course, is at his own level. So yeah, for those reasons, I'm picking Lucas Almeida to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jafel Filho versus Clayton Carpenter. Now, Again, this is super interesting from a stylistic perspective because you've got Filho, who is a very tricky grappler. Like, you have to mind your P's and Q's with this guy on the mat, whether you're on top of him, whether you're on bottom, especially if you're on top, because he's got this ability to sort of be tying your legs up without you knowing, and then suddenly is switching position, transitioning off his back and wrapping his legs around your leg, looking for heel hooks, knee bars. Like, he's a very, very dangerous fighter in regards to just not knowing what he's actually trying to set up on the mat. And the grappling game, like I say, it's it's very similar to if you're fighting an opponent that's got massive power but not got great technique. And I'm not saying Filho hasn't got good jiu-jitsu technique, because obviously he has, but what I'm saying is, if there's a striker with big power and not that great a technique, you've just got to mind your P's and Q's, is what I always say. Just keep your wits about you, don't make a mistake, be switched on at all times, because the second that you switch off, or the second that you make a mistake, that big power puncher is going to hit you and knock you out. And it's the same on the mat with Filho. If you take your mind off him, if you switch off, if you make an unforced error, a mistake, Filho's going to wrap you up and submit you. So you've got to be careful with Filho from that perspective. But on the flip side here with Clayton Carpenter's a good grappler himself. I do think Filho is going to be a bit of a problem if Carpenter gets on top, in regards to just keeping Carpenter looking, thinking, guessing what's happening. Okay, well, now he's doing this and now he's doing that. So what I think, if Carpenter takes Filho down, which I think he's going to, because Carpenter's got good wrestling, and also Carpenter blends the striking. He's one of those fighters that I just said with Lucas Almeida when I said it a minute ago, that he struggles against fighters that can blend that strike into the wrestling. You're not quite sure when it's coming, but you know that blend is there with the MMA game. Carpenter is that type of fighter. So I do think Carpenter will take Filho down. I don't think he's going to fear Filho's game. But what I think is going to happen is, if Carpenter does get on top of Filho, I don't think Carpenter's going to be able to do any sort of like extensively good work on top of Filho, because Carpenter's going to be very aware of what Filho's doing. Filho will just keep Carpenter's offense occupied. So Carpenter won't be able to put too much offense on the mat. He'll just be occupied. But then what's going to happen there is Carpenter's just going to do a clock running game. The clock's going to start ticking down. Filho's going to be looking for this submission, that submission that Carpenter is just seeing, delaying, preventing, and all whilst this is happening, Carpenter's going to be on top, just landing body, head, just doing some minimal work to make sure the referee doesn't split them up, but staying safe at the same time, which is not necessarily going to be massively entertaining to the crowds watching from an entertainment perspective, but I think Carpenter on top will be able to do a clock running job, where the clock's just running down and he's just winning the seconds, the minutes, and then ultimately the rounds. But then on the feet, I think that Carpenter will absolutely piece Filho up. And again, he's got to be careful, because Filho does have some power on the feet. You can see wings hard. He lands hard kicks, hard punches. And the reason he does that is because Filho doesn't mind overcommitting to the strikes, because if he overexerts himself, puts him off balance and he gets taken down, well, he loves being on the mat. So I don't think Filho is going to hold back from a power side and trying to land something that hurts Carpenter, but ultimately I think Carpenter's the much better striker, sharp boxing as well. If he gets through Filho's long and mid range into that boxing range, Carpenter's going to light Filho up in boxing range, because Filho's good with the straight punches down the middle, and those punches need the medium range, as I call it, and then the long range is obviously the kicks. But Carpenter gets through those two ranges into boxing range, and I think he pieces Filho up. Then he level changes into his takedown, and he just mixes things up really well. So I actually think stylistically, although he does have to mind his P's and Q's and be switched on at all times and not make a mistake, and I'm not going to be shocked if I don't watch this fight and I wake up in the morning and Filho's won by submission, but I do think that Carpenter has got a good stylistic fight here, as long as he doesn't make those defensive errors. So for those reasons, I'm picking Clayton Carpenter to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Vitor Petrino versus Thomas Petersen. Now, it's an interesting fight for Petrino because he's got a heavyweight wrestler here. So Petrino's not been long at heavyweight, although I absolutely love this dude up at heavyweight. He's not cutting weight, and he's just a big, absolute tank, ball of energy. You know, I don't think the weight cuts hurt him at light heavyweight necessarily, but I think up at heavyweight where he can sit and be basically a Jailton Almeida, not cut any weight, not put any pressure on his body. He can train all fight camp. He can build muscle if he wants to build muscle. He can do cardio if he wants to do cardio. He can work on development without, having the weight cut in the back of his mind. Petrino is a very, very interesting heavyweight. He's massive. I don't think he'll hit the 265-pound limit, at least not for a few years anyway, unless he decides to pack on a load of mass. So he's going to be this nice middle-ranged weighted heavyweight, which, like I say, some people think, okay, well, you're giving up 20, 30 pounds on your opponent, but look at Jailton Almeida. Jailton Almeida gives up so much weight against these guys at 265 pounds. But guess what? You take one of these 265 pounders down, and suddenly 265 pounds is very difficult to maneuver off your back and get back up to your feet. So, Petrino is definitely one of these fighters that's super interesting at heavyweight. But like I say, Thomas Petersen on the other side, from a wrestling perspective, he's got a good wrestling background, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can take Petrino down. Now, actually, even though I'm saying that Petrino is going to have a lot of advantages against these guys at 265 pounds, Thomas Petersen doesn't make that weight either. He's around 250 pounds. So I think both of these fighters are going to be in and around the same weight. And I kind of feel that favours Petrino, because I think Petrino is going to be the stronger, more physical, explosive fighter here. So even if Petersen does want to get inside, shoot takedowns, I think he's going to have to go through a lot of heavy artillery to get there. And that heavy artillery coming from Petrino is going to be big punches, big hooks, uppercuts up the middle, flying knees, big kicks. Like, Petersen's going to have to walk through a lot of fire to close the distance and get in on Petrino and take him down. Now, if that happens and he can get on top of Petrino, that's the area where it gets interesting for me. Because does Petrino explode back up to his feet? Does he get up with, technique? Because there's a big difference between those two. If he's exploding back up to his feet, then Petersen might only need 2 or 3 takedowns before Petrino sort of starts gassing out, and then those takedowns come easier. But I don't know. I think that Petersen might be outmatched physically here. I think Petrino's going to be physically stronger. I think Petrino's going to be landing hard shots for Thomas Petersen on his way into closing the distance to find the entries to his takedowns as well. I just feel that getting that takedown, which Petersen needs, by the way, if Petersen doesn't get takedowns here, I think Petrino knocks him out early. Petersen needs takedowns, and he needs them early, but he also needs to get these takedowns without panicking, without rushing and closing the distance in a bad way. And I just don't know if those two go hand in hand, because he needs the early takedown but can't rush or make mistakes. But if he doesn't get that early takedown, then he's going to struggle the longer the fight goes on, because he's going to start to get punched and kicked in the face. So I think it's a tough one for Petersen. I think Vitor Petrino has got a fight here where he's not dealing with a 265-pound wrestler. That might be a little bit different. He's dealing with a wrestler that's his own weight, that he's probably going to be physically stronger, and he's going to have the power advantage over from the striking perspective on the way in for his opponent to closing the distance and finding the entry into those takedowns. So, yeah, I think stylistically, physically, favours Petrino. And for those reasons, I'm picking Vitor Petrino to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Irina Alekseeva versus the UFC newcomer. Fighting at home, we've got Bia Mesquita. Now, Bia Mesquita, she is from Brazil, so that's why she's fighting at home, but she does train in Florida American Top Team with the good group of girls that are down there as well, and you can definitely see why Mesquita in this fight is a big favourite. And I know it's a UFC debut, and the amount of times that we sit on these, or I sit on these podcasts, and I'm sure other people do, and they're like, okay, well, yeah, this is a UFC debut against a fighter, an opponent that's not doing too well in the UFC, but we understand why they're a big favourite, because they've got an insane skill set, and then they end up coming into that UFC debut in a fight that they've absolutely should be winning pre-fight against a fighter that's not in good form and that does have inconsistency and losses, and then takes a comfortable loss. Like, we see it all the time, and it's almost like we try not to fall into that trap all the time, but we always fall into it. But the thing is, we can only go on what we're seeing pre-fight. We can't think, well, Mesquita's a big favourite here against Alekseeva that's not doing too well in the UFC, and, there's a big skill difference, but fighter A beat fighter B in this scenario 3 months ago. You can't compare other fights to these singular fights, and that's why we constantly get caught in these traps, because every fight's its own new fight. You can't think, well, this big favourite should be the big favourite against the fighter not performing well, but that's happened 3 times this year already. Well, that doesn't matter. This is a new fight. It's a new situation with 2 completely different fighters. And the reason I'm saying this is I'm just giving justification to why I'm picking Mesquita to win this fight, because unless I'd seen Mesquita like be in this type of situation 2 or 3 times previously in her career and she falls short at this hurdle, I've got no historic data on Mesquita as a fighter, as an individual fighter, to say that she's going to underperform as a big favourite. All I'm seeing from Mesquita is good striking, a good takedown game, really good grappling on top, like a heavy pressure grappling game on top, to the point where Irina Alekseeva, I just don't know where she's going to win this fight, because I don't think she's a better striker. I don't think that her takedown game, her wrestling, is better than Mesquita's, and I don't think that Alekseeva is the better grappler. I think Mesquita is better in every single area in this fight. I think she's got better, she's training at a better gym with better training partners, like high level athletes around her own weight as well, and training and probably doing really well against fighters, training partners that are better than Alekseeva is as a fighter as well. So I just think overall everything surrounding Mesquita is going to be better, that's going to allow her to be dominant. She also kind of reminds me of Jacqueline Amarim, who also, by the way, trains at American Top Team in Florida. And again, it's another reason why I feel like she's got these real high-level training partners. Amarim's a lot the same, big striking, and then when it comes to closing the distance, the body lock, takedown, and then it's almost like a wrap at that point. You either get a submission, get a ground and pound TKO, or your opponent doesn't get back up, and then the next round comes out, you take them down again and rinse and repeat. Like, Mesquita's that type of fighter, and I think Alekseeva's going to be in deep waters here. And yeah, I think Mesquita's going to look good on the feet. I think she's going to get the takedown she wants, and I think she could potentially take Alekseeva out here. But if she doesn't finish her on the mat, I think that she could then start the next round, take her down, control the rest of the round on top, and then in the 3rd round come out, take her down, control the rest of the round on top. I think it's a real tough fight for Alekseeva. I'm really intrigued to see how good Mesquita actually is inside the UFC, and I think if she's not one of these fighters that has sort of deceived us a little bit on the regional scene, I think we've got a real good fighter on our hands here in Bia Mesquita. I really like what I see from her. So for those reasons, I'm picking Bia Mesquita to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Lucas Rocha versus Stewart Nicoll. Now, from a betting perspective, Stewart Nicoll, slight underdog here. Some places it's a pick'em, but again, where there's the slight leans at the bookies, the betting market's slightly leaning towards Lucas Rocha being the favourite. And I'm not sure I quite agree with that. Like, look, I understand Stewart Nicoll came into the UFC on a load of hype as a moderate favourite to beat Jesus Aguilar, who's actually... I like Jesus Aguilar, and he's actually showing that he's a UFC caliber fighter as well. I think when he came into the UFC, a lot of people just writ him off and thought, okay, he's not going to be around for too much longer. But to be fair to Aguilar, he's proven a lot of people wrong, me included. I mean, I've never not liked him. I've always thought he's a super entertaining fighter. I just didn't know where his ceiling was at and where his quality, his skill set and quality was going to allow him to hang in the UFC. But it turns out he's doing pretty well. So Stewart Nicoll came into that fight against Aguilar, and man, he absolutely ran through Aguilar early, striking good, takedown good, topside grappling, ground and pound, looking for submissions. Absolutely the full package from Stewart Nicoll. Couldn't have wished for a better opening first 60 seconds to his UFC career. But then what happened on top is Aguilar sort of stood up whilst Nicoll was on his back, got onto his toes, shook Nicoll off, wrapped a guillotine up, jumped the gilly straight away and tapped him. And Aguilar's submission is that guillotine. He's one of those fighters you don't want to present your neck anywhere close to his arm, because he's going to wrap a guillotine up, and he loves the guillotine. Stewart Nicoll just got caught. That doesn't mean all the hype that everyone talked about prior goes out the window. I actually think he's a really good fighter. He's very fast on the feet, he's lightning on the feet, good strikes, good technique, good skill set. But then he's got this wrestling game as well, where he can chain wrestle and stick to a wrestling game plan. And on the mat, he's just a really good striker. You can tell that he knows what he's doing positionally, and he can mix between, getting the good position to submission hunting, but then realizing when the submission's not there, going to the ground and pound, then realizing when the submission's back on. And he just was in an unfortunate situation where Aguilar shook him off, got back up to his feet, and then guillotined him. If Aguilar never found that guillotine, I think Nicoll would have took him down again and done better work on top of him and probably finished him. Now, with Lucas Rocha, for me, the jury's still out on how good this guy is. He's got a good record. He's got a big record. It's 17-1 or 17-2. And that is a really good record, but you look at the level of competition he's been fighting to get that record, and that's where you start asking some questions. They're not all terrible. He's got some good wins as well, but I just don't know how good Rocha actually is. He made his UFC debut against Clayton Carpenter. Carpenter took him down when he wanted to take him down, and then found the finish in round 2 by submission. And I'm just looking at Stewart Nicoll thinking, well, look, Nicoll can probably hang with Rocha. Rocha's got a real explosive striking style. So you've got to be careful. And again, just like I was saying with Clayton Carpenter, ironically, and Jafel Filho, you've got to mind your P's and Q's, because if you switch off for a second, let your defense down for a second, Rocha's going to fly a throwing something at you and knock you out. He's very, very opportunistic and explosive with these attacks. And we saw that on the Contender Series as well. He was getting absolutely dominated. And then round 2, just found a fly in the out of nowhere and knocked the guy out. So that's who he is as a fighter. But Rocha's clearly got issues of defending takedowns and the topside grappling. Because the Contender Series fight, before he got that flash finish, He was taken down 5 times. He was controlled on the mat. He was getting dominated. It was a fight that was looking like the other guy should have been an absolute massive favourite. I don't know if he was or not. But then you go to Rocha's UFC debut, gets took down twice by Clayton Carpenter, finished in round 2. It was an easy fight for Carpenter, it seemed. And Stewart Nicoll's got that takedown ability, and he's got that good grappling. And I just feel that Rocha's got a bad stylistic fight here. And even if Nicoll doesn't get the fight down to the mat and it's a striking fight, well, over 15 minutes, I think Nicoll's going to do the better work as long as he doesn't get caught with that big explosive strike. I think he beats Rocha in a striking fight as well. I just feel that there's some recency bias on the betting line, market overcorrection as well, and Nicoll's sitting as an underdog as a result of losing against Jesus Aguilar, which could be one of those one-off losses where a fighter comes in. I've just said it with Bia Mesquita. Fighter comes in with a lot of hype, is a favourite, doesn't perform, and loses when nobody expects him to. And then the next fight, they're this underdog that shouldn't be an underdog. And I kind of feel we've got this situation before. This situation here. It's just I've now got historical data to think that, okay, well, Nicoll's lost that fight when he was looking really good, and now he's being completely overlooked because of that one loss against a fighter stylistically that he's going to have opportunities to not only beat but finish as well. So yeah, for me, I think Stewart Nicoll is going to get into the win column for the first time in the UFC, and we're going to see a run of wins from him. All starts with this on Saturday night. I'm picking Stewart Nicoll to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Valter Walker versus Muhammad Usman. Now, Valter Walker, I don't know if this has actually been done. Someone might be able to tell me if it has or if it hasn't, but I'm pretty sure Valter Walker is the first fighter in UFC history to win 3 fights in a row via heel hook. And it's such a weird, I wouldn't say a weird thing because it's mixed martial arts. I was going to say a weird thing, but Valter Walker's this big, powerful heavyweight, and somehow he's found this niche in heel hooks. It's just crazy. It's just, when you look at Valter Walker, you know, the first 20 seconds of his fight where he's back and forth and landing strikes and you see how big he is, the last thing that you think Walker's going to be is this heel hook specialist. So, yeah, and it's just come out of nowhere as well. It's not like he's got a history of hitting heel hooks on opponents outside the UFC, which you would think that that's where you're hitting heel hooks in your career, with opponents outside the UFC that aren't at that UFC level. And then what makes it even more hilarious is Valter Walker only has 4 submission wins in his career. You know, UFC and outside of the UFC. And one of those submission wins was a rear naked choke 5 years ago in his second pro fight. Now suddenly he's got 3 back-to-back heel hook wins. It's just crazy. And I'm telling you now, he's going to get another one. I genuinely think that Usman is the exact type of opponent for Valter Walker to be able to get another one. And I'll tell you why I think he's going to get it. First of all, Usman isn't a fighter that I think is a sort of submission specialist. And I'm not saying you have to be a submission specialist to avoid heel hooks, but what I mean by that is, for the most part in training, fighters aren't really practicing knee bars and heel hooks. They're the types of submissions that you want to be putting on your training partners, because MCLs and ACLs and LCLs can tear and rip, and you can wreck your opponent, you can wreck your training partner in your friend's career with something that's just gone wrong. Accidents can happen. So it's not typically the type of submissions that you practice in the gym. However, I guarantee this camp, Usman's been practicing it. And this is where I think he's going to get got, because I think Usman is going to be so conscious of Walker attacking heel hooks, he's going to end up just freezing like a deer in headlights on the mat once Walker starts going for his leg. And I think he's going to panic. And I think the panic is going to make him do something, react in a way that he wouldn't have reacted in the gym, where he's been practicing the defense to these heel hooks, and he's going to end up in a heel hook because of it. It's almost like, you know that knockout is going to come from the big power puncher, and you've worked on your defense, you've worked on keeping your hands up, you've worked on countering and movement. But as soon as the 4 or 5 punch combination come from the big power puncher, you panic because you know what's coming at you, and all that training that you've done kind of for that moment goes out the window. But that moment it goes out the window is the moment you lose the fight. And I think the exact same thing is going to happen with Walker. I don't think that Usman is even like levels above him from a striking perspective either. I think Walker's going to be able to be the stronger fighter here. I think both fighters will happily go into the clinch with each other, because they're both very clinch heavy fighters. But I think Walker's going to get the fight down to the mat. As soon as that fight goes down to the mat, guarantee the first thing on Usman's mind is, oh my God, the heel hook. Don't let him get my leg. Don't let him get my leg. That might actually let Valter Walker be able to pass from maybe guard, half guard, maybe into mount. Maybe he gets a ground and pound finish. But if he gets a ground and pound finish, or maybe Usman turns his back and gets choked out, I'm telling you now, that'll come from the consciousness and the, over obsession of this heel hook. I guarantee that heel hook is going to be key to this fight, whether Walker lands it or not. If he doesn't hit the heel hook, he'll do well on the mat, because Usman's so scared of getting caught with another heel hook for Walker's record. And if Walker does hit the heel hook, then he's going to hit the heel hook, and the second that he attacks the legs, I think Usman's going to panic, make a mistake, and do something that puts him deeper into this heel hook. Maybe Walker's got multiple different ways of landing this heel hook, which we just don't know about yet either. So I know I've spent a lot of time on the heel hook, but I kind of feel like whatever happens in this fight is going to be due to the fear of what Walker's now going to be putting into his future opponents with this heel hook, because 3 heel hooks back to back to back is a big deal. So for me, I'm picking Walker. I'm picking Valter Walker to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Julia Palastri versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Now, Palastri is like a -350 favourite, and I don't get this either. I think the fight is going to be razor close. Even if Palastri wins, I think she's definitely losing a round here. I don't think that she's going to come in here and steamroll Karolina Kowalkiewicz for 3 straight rounds and dominate her for 3 rounds, which is what she should be doing, or finishing her as a -350 favourite. So I just think Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she's over the hill to a certain extent. So she's over the hill when you're looking at her fighting the champion, top 3, top 5, maybe even top 10, top 15, right? She's not at that level that she used to be. She's declined enough to have dropped to levels. But Julia Palastri isn't the types of fighter that Kowalkiewicz is losing against. Like, Kowalkiewicz's last 2 losses were Yasmin Lucindo, who I hold in really high regard in the division. I don't think there's any shame in that loss. And Denise Gomes. And Denise Gomes has been a little bit hit and miss. Like, at one point you're thinking, okay, she's going to go all the way to the top, but then she'll lose a fight, and there's some inconsistency there. But for the most part, Gomes is a really good fighter, super explosive. You have to mind your P's and Q's. Bear in mind, Kowalkiewicz has been knocked out bad before by Jessica Andrade, so I can imagine when she's fighting Denise Gomes, she's thinking, oh my God, flashbacks to that Andrade fight, don't let this happen again. But Palastri, I just don't see why she's a -350 favourite. She's got decent striking, and this is the other thing as well. It should be, in theory, a striker versus striker fight. Julia Palastri prefers to stay striking. Kowalkiewicz prefers to strike. And what I think we're going to see here is a relatively high volume back and forth fight. You land 2 punches, I land 2 punches. You land 3, I land 3. You land 2, I land 1, I land 2, you land 1. So I just feel it's going to be punch for punch, I think the volume count's going to be very similar throughout 3 rounds. I don't think either fighter's going to necessarily be hurt. Maybe if Pilastre can cut Kowalkiewicz and, there's the blood optics with the damage, and that creates a fight that's now looking very more secure than a close potential split decision type of fight. But I think for the most part, the high percentage probability here is that both fighters go toe for toe. They land very similar volume. Even if one of these fighters is like 5 or 10 punches higher than their opponent on the overall volume, I mean, you divide, say if it's 10 punches, you divide that by 3 over the 3 rounds. That's only an extra like 3+ punches per round. And that's not really going to be that noticeable from a judge's perspective. So I just think it's going to be a back and forth, nice, polite, striking fight where both fighters are going to be sitting at the end of the fight or standing at the end of the fight, either side of the referee, not knowing which way the judges' scorecards are going to be. And we've got, in this type of fight, a -350 favourite. Doesn't sit well with me. I'm going to side with the underdog. I'm picking Karolina Kowalkiewicz to win this fight. And finally, the last fight to break down, we've got Simon Oliveira versus Luan Lacerda. Now, Luan Lacerda, again, I've just mentioned it, maybe 10-15 minutes ago with Jafel Filho. Luan Lacerda is another one of those types of fighters. You've got to be really careful with him on the mat. He's a specialist in jiu-jitsu. If he gets you on the mat, he's likely going to wrap you up at this level in the UFC anyway. Obviously, if he was fighting top 10, top 15, then it's a different conversation. But Simon Oliveira isn't that top 10, top 15. And actually, Simon Oliveira there's an argument to say he's been a little bit underwhelming in the UFC, because I liked what I saw from Simon Oliveira before he came in. I thought he was a good striker. He was one of these fighters that had that good guillotine, but he was a decent grappler as well, and he looked like he was a fighter that could put it all together and actually really be something exciting in the UFC, but that hasn't quite transpired. Now, in all fairness to Oliveira, and you can never ignore this, you've got to acknowledge all elements of a fighter and where they're at right now due to the level of opponents they've been fighting, because that's a massive thing. If all you're fighting is terrible opponents, you're going to look the best fighter in the world. But if you're fighting against the best opponents at this level, especially in the UFC, then yeah, you're not going to look as great as somebody else that's fighting the easier opponents. But Simon Oliveira has fought some difficult opponents. Daniel Marcos, Tony Gravely. I know we've not heard of Tony Gravely in a while, but stylistically, Tony Gravely was a problem for a lot of these fighters at this level. The boxing wrestling style just got at people. Daniel Marcos, like I say, at the time we didn't know how good Marcos actually was. It wasn't until he beat Oliveira and then won another couple of fights we're thinking, holy shit, like Marcos is a legit fighter. So Marcos was definitely a loss that aged well for Oliveira, if you like. I know it's never great to take a loss, but some losses age better than others. So Oliveira, to his credit, he has fought some good opponents, and the opponents that have beaten him would maybe beat Lacerda as well, but I just don't know with Oliveira. I can't sit here and confidently say he's going to defend takedowns, and if he gets taken down, he's going to be able to get back up comfortably. I just can't sit here and confidently say that, because Oliveira hasn't shown me to this date that he can do that at this level in the UFC. And it's a little bit like one of those fights where I'm actually not going to be surprised if Oliveira wins the fight. And I've said this before, I say it often, something that I do go to very often just to make a point. If I don't watch this fight and I look at the results the next day and Oliveira's won the fight, I'm not going to be surprised at all. But I just don't, I can't pick Oliveira to win a fight that I haven't seen that he's going to be able to work the defensive work that he needs to in order to be able to win that fight. I can't pick him until I've seen the fight, but by the time the fight's done, then the pick's irrelevant. So, look, I think Luan Lacerda is going to be good enough from a striking perspective to hang with Oliveira. I don't think Oliveira is going to tee off on him striking and start putting on this striking masterclass. He might be beating Lacerda striking, outpointing him, landing good strikes, but I don't think Lacerda is going to be at a point where he's in trouble and can't do anything. I think Lacerda is going to be able to take Oliveira down. When he takes him down, I think he's going to be able to do good work, whether it's a ground and pound, whether it's a submission finish, or whether he just stays on Simon Oliveira and does a clock running job and then wins the seconds, minutes, and then of course the rounds and wins the fight that way. I think Lacerda's got a good enough skill set with him being a specialist on the mat to be able to get this fight won down due to the grappling. And when you ask yourself the question, do you think Lacerda gets takedowns in this fight? Because ultimately that'll be the difference between Lacerda winning comfortably in the fight, being super close, and maybe Lacerda losing. Does Lacerda get takedowns in this fight? I think he does. And for that reason, I think he's going to win the fight. So I'm picking Luan Lacerda to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, as I always say, thank you for tuning in, whether you're listening on one of our podcast platforms like Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is that you're listening on. I always appreciate everybody giving this podcast and myself the time of day to give it a listen. Really does go a long way, and always appreciated. If you do want a conversation, then please come over to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/MMAplay365. I know I've been a little bit slack over the last week or two. I apologise. I've just been super busy. But I always try and get over to the comments to make sure that I'm replying to everybody. So tell me who your favourite underdog is. Tell me who the biggest... Tell me which favourite you think is going to lose on this card, because there's a couple of big favourites, and I'm almost certain that at least one of them is going to lose. So which one do you think that's going to be? Which big favourite do you think is going to lose? Tell me if you agree with any of my picks. Tell me if we disagree. Whatever you want to do. But ultimately, it also really helps the algorithms for YouTube as well. I won't sugarcoat over that. Like, it helps the algorithms. It helps the video go out to more people. The more people it goes out to, the more views, the better it is for the channel. More people that subscribe and like as well, the more it does the rounds on people's YouTube accounts. So please come onto YouTube. Please subscribe. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and you get an email every single week when we drop a new podcast. Like the video and also comment as well. And that is all I ask of you for the free content that I put out every single week. That's all at youtube.com/MMAplay365. And one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler, whether you're a long-term gambler, fun gambler, just want to tailor professional handicapper, or whether you're one of the many subscribers now that seem to only be subscribing due to Bayes AI, which I kind of take as an insult to me, and I'm only joking. The AI is phenomenal. I really like it, to the point of when I've got a really confident bet and I see the AI going against it, it always makes me look at it thinking, okay, well, I'm probably going to get turned over here. So, yeah, I hold the AI in high regard. It really is a phenomenal tool, phenomenal algorithm. And at MMA Play 365, you don't pay extra for that. Everything with the AI and the handicapper comes together in the same packages. You just got to choose whether you want one event at $5, monthly for $10, or an entire year at easily massively valuable price at $99 for an entire 12 months of UFC predictions. So yeah, that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'll leave it there, not go any further. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.